project director of the Middle East Forum. And we are a think tank that deals with the Middle East. Shocker, I know. Anyway, you might wonder why the Middle East Forum is here, and given South Asia, Hindu isn't usually something you associate directly with the Middle East, but we do study, as you mentioned, the idea of Islamism or radical Islam, and we have been very active in opposing Islamism and radical Islam. That does not mean opposing Muslims, such as our friend that we just heard from a minute ago. It does mean, however, opposing theocratic ideas that have been put forward by some Muslims over the past 100 years. People like Hassan al-Banna, Khomeini, Maududi, a few others of their idols of fit. This sort of idea is not a religion in the traditional sense. It is closer to communism or fascism than Islam as the religion, and has led to destruction and misery of more than just Hindus or Christians or Jews, but for Muslims themselves. And I suppose that's what I'm here to talk about. The horrifying events of October the 7th massacre, which 1,200 were killed and 250 were kidnapped, was a particularly horrifying chapter in a longer-running fight between Hamas, a branch of the Muslim Brotherhood, that is backed by Iran, and Israel. And it goes back to Israel's founding. Not all of Israel's antagonists are Islamists. Some are driven by Palestinian nationalism, communism, or other ideologies. But radical Islamists have been the most numerous and their most violent foes. India faces a similar problem. Pakistan, much like Palestinian territories, was not birthed in Islamist ideology, but particularly after the death of Jinnah, Islamism has been a tool the Pakistani military and other forces in Pakistan have used in the fight against India. This is particularly true when it comes to the Kashmir conflict. While the Kashmir dispute and Israel's disputes with the Palestinians are different, there are meaningful similarities as well. I've seen this up close. I have visited the Palestinian territories, and I've also personally visited the Indian side of Kashmir. I enjoy visiting the West Bank. I met some fascinating people there, but I have to admit, it was a bit bleak. By contrast, Kashmir was easily one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. In fact, I've come to joking with my Jewish friends that Kashmir is amazing. It's actually worth fighting over. The West Bank, anyway, it's a joke, people. Let me rewind a little bit. In 2020, I wrote an article entitled, "We Are All Hamas." It featured a picture I found online of militants with Palestinian flags marching in support of Hamas. The interesting thing about it was the picture that I posted in my article was not taken in Arabia. It was not taken in the Palestinian territories. It did not feature the Muslim Brotherhood or Al-Qaeda. It was taken in Pakistan in 2014 during the conflict between Hamas and Israel back then, and it was posted on Jamaat-e-Islami Pakistan's Facebook page. Even if misguided, it is understandable and predictable, perhaps, for people to have sympathy for their co-religious when conflict starts. But this goes beyond that. The leaders of various South Asia terrorist groups and radical movements have loudly pronounced their support, not just for the Palestinian cause, but for overt terrorist groups. And further, Maududi, of course, corresponded with Hassan al-Banna, the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, when he was founding Jamaat-e-Islami. These ideologies are very much intertwined. A story that illustrates this point, by the way, is there is a think tank in the UK called the Islamic Foundation. It is most likely the largest Jamaat-e-Islami institution outside of South Asia. It is a think tank, and it has two dining rooms. One is called the Maududi room, one is called the al-Banna room. Point being that the networks of the Muslim Brotherhood in India and the Muslim Brotherhood networks in the Middle East and their arms abroad in Europe, in America, are not the same, but neither are they entirely distinct, and they operate in the same way. I became involved with this through our work to fund money going to terrorism through charities. a US-based charity, Helping Hands for Relief and Development, which is a Jamaat-e-Islami charity. It's very open about it. It's not hard to find. Became enmeshed with, among other groups, Lashkar-e-Taiba and Hizbul Mujahideen in Pakistan. We also learned that they were funding a group that itself funded Hamas, a South Asian group that funded Hamas. They're called the Al-Khidmat Foundation. They still post, you can still find it on their website. They say, we are sending money to Hamas for their just jihad. And it goes both ways. There was another convicted terrorist, former US resident who did not get citizenship and was later deported for his crimes. He was a fundraiser for Palestinian Islamic Jihad, a designated terrorist group by the US. Since then, he's been living in Turkey. In Turkey, he has repeatedly gotten involved in events that take essentially the Pakistani Islamist position on Kashmir, which he conflates with Zionism, to him the ultimate evil. This is the kind of collaboration you see ideologically with the organizations that are stirring up anti-Jewish, anti-Israel sentiment on campus and anti-Hindu, anti-Indian sentiment as well. There's tons more examples of this domestically. The so-called BDS movement has quite openly said that India is sort of a co-equal villain, as it were, to and should also be part of their movement at different times. The Council on American Islamic Relations, an explicitly Hamas group founded by Hamas supporters in the 90s, and still carrying forward sort of the Palestinian banner and a lot of these issues, was at the spearhead of the protests in front of the Indian embassy after 370 was repealed, and working with other Jamaat-e-Islami groups, to do that. Even American Muslims for Palestine, a very specific group, has been very much involved in these same issues. I could go on and on. I could give 1,000 examples. I'd bore you to death, discussing all the different ways these kinds of groups, these Islamist groups, are working together, and they see their cause as a common one. This generally involves painting Israel and India as uniquely sinister and having unique sins that are somehow wildly above all other nations, and then conflating the two. In fact, there is a man named Azad Issa, a man of Indian ancestry. I believe he lives in South Africa, although I believe he may have been in New York. It's a little confusing where he is in any given time, but he specifically runs a Substack that discusses the India-Israel relationship and paints it as uniquely evil. He has written a book to that effect as well. I wrote a, shall we say, not glowing review of it for one of our publications recently. This goes to something else that's kind of interesting, and that is that Issa himself is probably not an Islamist. I see no real evidence of that other than some of his friends are. If you read his book, he actually cites Indian communists more often than he does Islamists. He comes from the hard left, and that's another the sort of political reality you face, is the hard left, and Islamists often make common cause. But the point is, all of these same ideologies at the end of the day oppose Israel's existence, and they oppose India's rule of Kashmir. And eventually it will just continue going farther than that. To them, to the Islamists, it is about Muslim theocracy. To the far left is about anti-colonialist sentiment, or whatever you want to call it, which I'm not saying is not a legitimate thing. I am saying it's a legitimate application. I'm actually going to say one other interesting tidbit of information that I hope you guys will appreciate. I'm actually in the middle of an article that I have not yet published of an issue that hasn't gotten much attention, but it shows, again, how many of the enemies of Israel and the radical Islamists that oppose their existence in India are the same. As I mentioned, I visited Kashmir a while back, and I visited the Hazrat Bal Shrine, where thousands of Muslims were praying. It was remarkable, only insofar as how unremarkable it was, insofar as, we have all this propaganda about Muslims not being allowed to pray in Kashmir or whatever. I mean, there were thousands of them all around. They barely took notice of me. A few blocks away when I left, I saw something I did not expect. A huge banner in a Shia-heavy area of Kashmir that had pictures of the Ayatollah Khomeini, General Soleimani, and other Iranian government officials. And when I noticed that, I started looking at other places. And basically every Shia heavy area of the Kashmir, I saw more Iranian propaganda. I talked to a number of Shia Muslims in Kashmir. Most of them were very friendly. Most of them were more or less pro-Indian government. They were not, terrorists. They were not jihadists. They were just people. But most of them had food they bought from Iran. They had business connections in Iran. And some were more friendly to Iranian radicals, the Shias, the Ayatollahs, and their ilk, than others. This is not meant to cast them in a uniquely bad light. It's just to point out that at the end of the day, look, Hamas's biggest funder and biggest supporter in the region right now is Iran. And the fact that they are trying to propagandize Indian Shia tells you again, they have an end in that, right? It's not just for fun. And they are trying to turn them against their home country as well. This should not go unnoticed or unopposed. So, just in sum, October 7th was a horrifying and bloody event, and the unfortunate bloodshed that has happened since is a result of a failure of imagination, of a failure to believe that the radicals really mean what they say. I mean, they weren't shy, that they wanted to kill Jews and destabilize the region in order to get what they want. They said it 1,000 times, they just finally did it. We need to start believing them and act accordingly. India has seen other attacks that are perhaps not quite as horrific, but nonetheless extremely horrific. The Pulwama attack of 2019, Mumbai attack of 2008, of course the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits, just to name a few. So let me bring this back, since we were talking about especially like domestic things like the universities here. A very small example of what I'm talking about that I've been currently working on. There is currently an ongoing battle over something called the Center for Security, Race, and Rights. It is the part of Rutgers Law School. It has many faculty, affiliates, and others that have extremely hardline anti-Israel views, very much apologizing for the most radical forms of Islam. They have gotten in trouble because a nominee for a judgeship had been sitting on their board, attracted the scrutiny of Congress, which discovered that they had an event just a year or two ago that essentially was on the anniversary of 9/11 and essentially blamed everything on America, nothing on the Al-Qaeda that murdered 3,000 Americans. And this has become, started an investigation by Senator Lindsey Graham. One faculty affiliate on the Center for Security, Race, and Rights is Audrey Trushke, a name that I doubt needs introduction in this room, arguably the most anti-India professor in America. So the point is, in ways both big and small, the forces, the radical Islamist forces, again, not all Muslims, just had one that is a perfect example of the kind of person that we're not talking about, but this ideological battle, this ideology threatens both. And I think that is why you're seeing some of this stuff happens with the same forces that are also going after Jewish students, as our friend just discussed. And it needs to be understood and treated as such. The current battle in Gaza and the fights on campus over Israel are sort of the forefront of this current larger picture. But it hasn't always been that way. It's been India before, and I think it can be again. And so just we need to work together accordingly to find moderate partners and genuinely make peace, not engage in more demonization and untruth. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff, for sharing your insights. And we want to take a minute at this point in time to welcome someone from Congressman Greg Landsman's office. Nolan, please come and share a few words on the Congressman's behalf.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nolan Brown, and I'm the Special Assistant and Legislative Correspondent in Congressman Greg Lansman's office. I'm going to keep this very brief. Greg would like for me to tell you all that he wishes that he could have joined you all today. He wholeheartedly supports efforts to combat hate and discrimination in all forms, and including anti-Hindu discrimination. We all deserve to feel safe and respected in our communities. Thank you so much for having us today, and please feel free to reach out to us if we can ever be of assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Nolan, and we appreciate your time and presence here. So as both of our speakers, Cliff and Sehun, had pointed out, we want to reiterate that it is really going to be a collaborative effort, cutting across various communities and belief systems and cultures to come together and make sure that we address the patterns that are established preceding hateful conduct, rhetoric, and events. So with that, we would like to play a video clip of Mr. Sundar Iyer. Sundar Iyer is an entrepreneur and Silicon Valley innovator who was targeted under the assumption of his Hindu faith and held beliefs. He was targeted by the California Civil Rights Department and dragged through a very troubling experience, a lawsuit. He triumphed in the end. However, the story needs to be heard because this can happen to anyone at any point in time. So Utsav Tejal Shah. Tejal ji is Executive Director of Hindu Mandir Empowerment Council, or HMEC, and Vice President of the World Hindu Council of America. She will be talking on the attack on Hindu temples across the U.S.
Namaste everyone. Hello friends, brothers and sisters. I am here representing, as you all heard, Hindu Mandir Empowerment Council, which is an initiative of World Hindu Council of America, VHPA, Vishwa Hindu Parishad of America, in our native language or the mother tongue of Bharat, India. Next slide, please. So we hear the word temple, but in our native language or the Hindi language, we call it mandir as well, which is commonly heard for the place of worship for Hindu religion followers. So what the temple represents, what the mandir represents, it's the place where we go for our worship, for our religious practices, for our spiritual practices. It's the place where we go for the eternal peace. It's the place where our faith grows from zero to the infinite. When we go to the temple first time, maybe our age is just few months or few days old, I would say 30, 40 days max. That's the time we started cultivating the faith or the Shraddha for our place of worships. And as we grow in our life, as we move on in our life, the Shraddha and the faith grows inside us. And the same thing we try and we work on spreading to the others in the community. Temple is also a place for the education. Education about the Hindu ethos, education about the Hindu culture, heritage, and the message that we can take it to the world, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the whole universe is one family. This is the place when we end our prayers at the end of the day. In the evening, we say that Vishwaka Kalyan Ho, meaning we worship for the benefit and the betterment of the entire universe when we end our day. And when these such places get attacked, what happens is very, very difficult to take for anybody. So let's move on in our discussion. Next slide, please. Utsalji, next slide, please. So Hindu Mandir Empowerment Council, it represents the 1100 mandirs across USA. 800 some mandirs are already partnering with us, and we are bringing them in the fold of one platform where they can commonly network, collaborate, and discuss their own challenges, and then come up with a solution that they all can take through the various places as well as in the community. Hindu Mandir Priest Council or the Hindu Mandir Priest Conference is another thread that has come out of HMEC. We meet annually, and we also talk about our common challenges and what can be taken away from that as a solution. Next slide, please. These are the two examples that we see when we heard about the vandalism of our mandir maybe a few years back. One in Louisville, Kentucky, and another in, I think the next one is in California. Next slide, please. These are the very, very recent attacks that those happen on mandirs in California specifically. The Swaminarayan SMVS temple, Sri Vijay, the mandir, and then I think I have difficulty seeing the slides, but basically the Sherawali mandir, these are the two. Those were attacked with the anti-Semitism and the Khalistani movement type of slogans written on the walls of the temples. The next slide, please. These are some just images of one of the mandir in Sacramento, how it was vandalized and the robbery happened at the mandir. Next slide, please. These are the images of, I think these are actually videos, but I don't know whether we can play it or not. There are 3 videos. Though this is a very, very disturbing videos that we can say that's 3 fellows, okay? Literally were coming to one of the mandirs, Surya Narayan Mandir in Irvine, California, and they were trying to just get into the temple, and they could not. And there was some resistance about how the reporting was done by the police for this particular incident for the Irvine Mandir. Next slide, please. Let the video play. So this is basically the timeline of all the attacks that happened in a very short time frame, starting from October 2023 to January 2024. And very recently, just 15 days back, I have heard one of the mandir which is very, very actively participating in HMEC council that the theft happened, and the theft happened in the courtroom. We can't even believe that how they sneak into the mandir, taking advantage of one of the community programs that mandir runs for entire community, not just for Hindus. And the courtroom was like, the courts were stolen. 20 to 25 courts were stolen just from the courtroom. So this is like, we cannot even understand that what is the phenomenon here, what is the sequence here, why such things are happening again and again and again, and not just in California, but across USA. Next slide, please. So when such incident happen at the mandir, basically, it's a mental harassment, it is a disturbance to the executives, the priest gets terrified, they don't feel like being or serving the temple, the community members' faith, and they get emotionally hurt because it's a very sacred place in our mind. We want to go there, we want to worship there, we want to get nurtured by the religious and spiritual practices that happens in the mandir, the positive energy that mandir would give out to you as a worshipper or the follower of the dharma or the religion, and all this get disturbed when any little or such incident happens at the mandir, and it's very difficult for anybody to take it to the heart and the mind. Next slide, please. So next few slides are basically just the slides tell us that our not only the dharma or the religion, but what we believe into, the way of life is also being affected and impacted across the United States, how we are being treated, and these quotes are taken right from the public information available from the pro SB 403, and we all know what is SB 403. So let's just scroll through the slide. I don't want to take a lot of time here, but our entertainment, our art, our way of greeting people, our way of eating food, being a vegetarian, even the putting a bindi, that is also kind of attacked in some or other way. If we are winning a competition, our children are winning a competition, math or science or spelling bee, that is also being looked at very differently. Totally negative, totally absurd narrative is put in place and being spread around. So this is again like it's going against what we are trying to preach and what we want to communicate in the society. Next slide, please. The businesses are also affected. If there is a business run by the Hindu or versus the business run by the Pakistanis, there is a different kind of narrative being spread. Next slide, please. So basically, I think, on top of all of that, the Hindutva or the dismantling Hindutva, also something little happens in one corner of Bharat, which is like a hijab movement, correct? That has nothing to do with the overall preaching or the message that Hindu Dharma gives out. But then mandirs are forced to go with such narrative and support them and work out against India. So these are some examples that we have put over there. And our organization, we always say that American Hindu, we never say Hindu American, correct? We are American first, then we are Hindu. And at the same time, we would like to, as my previous speaker said, that we are here for the better life for ourselves, for our family, for our friends, our community, and the country. So that is what we strive for, that is what we work for, but that is not the narrative being shared in the society in general for the Hindu Dharma. Next slide, please. So what HMEC is doing, we know that this is the narrative against us, working against us, so we try to work with the temple very, very closely. We are going to take the tour of entire United States starting from March 25th, going mandir to mandir to mandir to mandir. And we want to educate them. We want to make them aware of the narrative. At the same time, we want to teach them that how you can take the advantage of some of the resources available to you. And one of the example is a safety and security grant that is available from the federal as well as the state government. Many mandirs are not aware, and we are taking an initiative and effort to have the mandirs educated so that they can take the advantage of such fundings available and make the place of worship secure and safe. Next slide, please. So these are some of our contacts. I will be here after the session as well, so if anyone has any question around what HMEC is and what we do, what VHPA is, and what are the other components of the VHPA, I can answer those questions. Next slide, please. That's it? Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tejasji, and of course, thank you to the organization for looking out for the safety of the Hindu mandirs and the community associated with it. Our next speaker is going to be Mr. Puneet Sahani. He is a Sikh American scholar whose research focuses on the evolution of the Sikh identity and Khalistani terrorism. His presentation or his talk is on the profile of the perpetrators of affecting larger geopolitical concerns. Mr. Sahani.
Namaste, Jai Ma Bharati. So, we are here because there is a surge of attacks on Hindu temples across North America, and my case here is that this is not just something that should concern like 1% of Hindus in America. It affects and it should be of concern to 100% of Americans, because this is a very serious national security threat. And it is coming from the abuse of the asylum laws. And again, like my background is actually in computer science, so and I may take you to a thing that like it's kind of there, but I hope I can help because I argue for the first principles, and I'll provide you evidence of. Hello, is it better now? Yeah. Okay. So let's take an example, just the presentation before me, she was going to 2023, but there was an attack pretty close to where I live in New York City on Queens. It was the day after the Indian Independence Day on Tulsi Mandir. And the guys were actually caught on CCTV camera, and the congressperson of that locality, her name is Jennifer Rajkumar, and she said, oh, we are gonna take these people and we're gonna file, like hate crimes. Now this is actually very interesting, and it's actually very, very important. See, the thing is, in America, if you charge somebody for a hate crime, they can go as much as for 20 years. But if you say, like, they did some political protest, you don't even get a slap on the wrist. And I know this is the argument that they would take. So I presented to Jennifer Rajkumar all the evidence that I had. So, to give you a perspective how dangerous these Khalistanis are. So in just that area of New York City, Queens, where this happens, which is kind of like their heart and center. So I gave her like 1994, 1996, 2011, so many reportages that are covered in New York Times. So, and now, at that time there was not any, online edition, it was only print edition. So this one small area or Gurdwara was repeatedly making, and Indians as a whole are about 1% of the US population. So how much would be the Sikhs? Maximum 25%. And they are spread all across the United States. The first ones came to the Pacific coast. So I just said, these people are attacking. And if you see all the victims, and these are just where, somebody has died of violence. There are so many where the police could not, find out what happened. There was like somebody who died, somebody who got burned, something got fired. And I just said, so first what they're going to make is, if you take this thing, they're going to say you're attacking the Sikhs. So I'm like, here is all the evidence, that the Sikhs are the biggest victims of these thugs. And the second case they are going to make is, we did some political protest. And I said, why it is so important, and again, when I talk about national security, so when we talk about national security and terrorism, the very first thing that will come to the mind of people is 9/11, right? And that was the greatest act of aviation terror in the world, and it still is. If you go before that, what was the greatest act of aviation terror? Some of you may know it was actually the Khalistanis bombed, the plane, a civil airliner in 1985, out of Canada, and in that 329 people died, and more than 80 of them were kids under the age of 12. Now, if you may have a question, why did the Khalistanis from Canada bomb this plane? Why didn't they bomb from America? You see, the community here is bigger, and in many ways, it's easier to get weapons here than in Canada. So I tell you something very poignant, it's very interesting. In 1985, just when the Canadians were, planning to bomb the civil area. At the very same time, they were trying to do something very similar in America. But the Canadians dropped the ball. They had like a mountain of evidence, and there is a great journalist by the name of Terry Molesky. He has also written a book called Blood for Blood that goes into this tragedy. So they had a mountain of credible intelligence, but they did not set the deterrent. They allowed these terrorists to take advantage, which an open society allows, to undermine that system. And so they didn't do it. But the Americans were very proactive. So for example, there was a guy, his name was Gurpratap Singh Birk. So at the very same time, he was trying to do the same. He didn't do it. So he was trying to get weapons to kill the Prime Minister of India at the time, Rajiv Gandhi. So FBI caught him. There was an FBI undercover agent who said, okay, I'm going to provide. He never actually got hold of the weapons. He just wanted to try to get weapons to kill him. FBI sent him to prison, this Gurpratap Singh Birk, for 17 years. And that basically set an effective deterrent. And once you actually do that, you are safe because it's simple criminality and terrorism. You have to make it more expensive for the terrorists to not do, what they want to do. And I told Jennifer that you do that, this is 2022. You are going to make, Canada out of the United States. And, this is what will happen. And again, maybe because of Khalistani pressure and, maybe she was misled. She dropped the ball, and this is exactly what has happened. And they were showing, like for example, when they defaced these temples, there is written Bhindanwala Zinabad. So who is this Bhindanwala? So again, what is they are exactly like the Muslim Brotherhood. So the thing is, when they talk in English, they infiltrate the institutions of open societies. And if you hear they talk about freedom of speech and we want democratic rights and all this nonsense. But it's very interesting what they actually, when they speak to their own audience, because then the veneer drops. So, memory also does for, these jihadis in the Middle East. And what, I also and my team have started doing is basically transcribing what these Khalistanis actually say to their audience. So this Bhindanwala, and this is before anything of 84 happened, the tragic events. So Bhindanwala says from an open stage, like, police had impounded his bus. And he challenges the police, like, if you don't release my bus on this day by 5 p.m., I will kill 5,000 Hindus in 1 hour. So what does Hindus have to do with the bus? And he's saying my bus is like so expensive, my bus is like, I don't know, like 5 lakhs. And and the police has been holding this for 1 year. So let's, appreciate there is no depreciation. What he's basically saying, the cost of an innocent Hindu life is basically 60 rupees. So these are the kind of people who they are venerating. And again, like for example, this guy who bombed the plane, his name is Talvinder Singh Parmar or Babbar Khalsa. And this is not what Puneet Sani is saying, this is what multiple Canadian investigations have found, that this is the guy who basically bombed the plane. Now you see, these guys are being venerated inside your congressional district. So forget about Hindus or whatever, some brown people fighting amongst each other. There is, inside your congressional district, people who venerate, who gave genocidal calls for no reason. People who bombed kids in mid-air, and for them these are these great idols. Do you think they will ever be a decent neighbor to you? So this is a threat that is festering inside you. And you have to be careful. So for example, America is a great country with a strong military. And it lost the war in Afghanistan because Pakistan was a safe haven. And it is tragic that Canada certainly is the Pakistan of the West. But US is kind of, because earlier it used to be very proactive in dealing with terrorism. Actually, to give you a very interesting example. So this Khalistani terrorists, they bombed the plane in 1985. And they found out the organization who did that was Babbar Khalsa. Babbar Khalsa was not banned in Canada till 2002. You know why? Because they didn't give a damn. Actually, when 9/11 happened, then Americans got serious. And they started asking all the countries that you have to now act. Then Canada said, oh, okay, all right, maybe we should ban these people who have basically bombed the plane. And they were not just allowed to operate. Till 2002, they were a charity. So you could donate your tax-free dollars there. Now, other is like the asylum law. So for example, I give you an example, how these are being exploited. and why these mandirs are attacked and why these Indian consulates are attacked. Because this is a very easy way to get asylum. So in last year, I basically did an expose in March 2023. There is a Khalistani in India, and he's like boasting, again, so in English he talks about democratic rights and all. In Punjabi, when he's talking to this audience, he's like, yeah, I charge money and there is a fixed price, and you give me the money and I will give you the letter that you are suffering from persecution and you will get asylum. And the person asks, like, why are you charging money? He's like, how do I run my own office? I have like a party to run, so this is just like a way of source of income to me. And then, thankfully, the Daily Mail in the UK, 3 months after that, they did an expose of, the same thing. And, so they get like an undercover, person who says, he wants to file an asylum. And there is also one Sri Lankan, but most of them are Pakistani. And the lawyer is caught on camera. And he says, I don't care who you are. Doesn't matter if you sympathize with Khalistani or not. You just say you are Khalistani. And you say, you are being tortured and you are being persecuted and, you were sexually tortured and now you cannot be married and you have like suicidal thoughts, and we'll get you the asylum. And thankfully this became a news, and the Prime Minister of UK, Rishi Sunak, he took this up. And after that, a few months after that, now India is in the safe list. Safe list means you can't basically apply for religious persecution asylum from India. And if you see that once they did it, the cases, this attacks on temples and attack on consulates have dropped, because like it's a crime, it's an industry. So you see like what are the incentives and what are the costs. So now there's maybe some cost, but the incentives to do this kind of things have kind of dropped. But in US it's not. So I just I recommend you to follow my Twitter account. A lot of people think, and I'm sorry if I'm not fake humility, but I think it's the most credible source if you're interested in Sikh historiography and on Khalistani terrorism. It's the most scholarly source. So I just said, there is this guy, and he's a lawyer, and I again like transcribe in English, and you just see this ugly smirk on his face. And what he's saying is he names the judge, the immigration court judge. His actually name is Justice Patrick O'Brien, O.S. O'Brien. And what he's making of is, so this Justice Patrick is supposed to be a very strict person, right? And he's like, see how we got it. So he's like, here is the guy, and we got these pictures. And the judge kept repeating, I know your case is fake, but because of a legal technicality, I have to give you an asylum, right? So, and he has this smirk. See, he just kept saying and he just kept saying, and I don't know why the hell he was saying when, we got it. And he got the asylum. And there are like dozens and dozens of such lawyers, and there are hundreds and hundreds of like, TikTok videos, because they compete with each other. Even if your case is completely fake, you just, participate in some protest, you just go, Indian government should publish your picture, let's say, like you attack a temple, and that's it. You claim asylum. So this is, the UK put a stop to it, right? And it's continuing unabated in the US. So yeah, that's, and it's so striking. So for example, the Stockton Gurdwara, it's so sad. I was just talking to somebody in the audience that reminded me. So if you see all these Gurdwaras, so for example, the first congressman, and he was not just like the first congressman of Indian background, but any Asian. His name was Dalip Singh Son, right? And I was reading about Dalip Singh Son, who came to US about like a century ago. And his first book is basically Mother India. At that time, actually, a book had come out which denigrated Hinduism, and like the caste practices and all this Audrey Trusky and all this Khalistani gang do. So he basically said, I will write a book to correct this record. And to, for example, he says, for example, in UK, there is so much resistance to giving voting rights to women. Whereas in India, when they said women should not have voting rights, the Indians fought with the British government, and at that time India was still, and they forced the British, to basically take back, and the women should have the voting right. So this idea that the Europeans gave us, modern values. And what is also fascinating is he writes that, like, of course, he's a poor student at that time. There are not many employment. So he used to live at the Gurdwara. So he says, I'm writing this book in the foreword, thanks to the Gurdwara who has supported me. And then he writes, like, I am a Sikh, and it is my dharma to defend, it is my duty to defend Hindu dharma as a Sikh. So this was this idea and what this perverted nonsense that Khalistanis are, propagating. And I actually recommend his book. His family is still, running this Dilip Singh song. And now in Stockton Gurdwara again, and you see all these Khalistanis, they're coming from the southern border. And what kind of thing they are doing? So I share in Stockton Gurdwara. So they are celebrating, the Sikh Gurus are the highest preceptors of our tradition. So you are saying, this is 8th Guru's birthday and 7th Guru's death anniversary. And it is also the martyrdom day of Talvinder Parmar. Who is Talvinder Parmar? Who basically bombed the Air India airline. So these people, who killed children and who were mass murderers, and they are being equated at the same level as the Sikh Gurus. So again, it's my fight more than anybody else, and I'm going to fight it. But also like the America has to realize its own responsibility, and it's a national security threat, and this abuse of asylum is blatant and going on, and it should do its duty to put an end to it, and I will do mine. Jain Sikh. Oh, sorry. One more point. So I'll actually tell you, like, I have a suspicion, I have no idea why Jennifer did not take the case forward, right? And I kept trying to reach to her. I wrote her, she used to follow me, and I used to say, I don't want to criticize you publicly. Can you please tell me what is the thing? I asked through Suhag, can you connect me? So she did, but what is my hunch is, so when this came out, there is an organization here, actually in DC, it's called the Sikh Research Institute, And they published some garbage. Actually, they did not attack the temple, they just attacked Gandhi. And they attacked Gandhi, we have a reason to do that. And the reason to do it, Ambedkar, this great man who was, like uplifting for Dalits. Ambedkar wanted to be a Sikh, but Gandhi stopped him, right? And there is no evidence for this. They just cook up, or maybe like, no, actually tell you very interesting how nonsensical this is. Ambedkar says, I will, not die a Hindu, but I'll change another faith in 1935. Remember this, 1935. And immediately he's, he sends his nephew and son to Punjab to see life. And he is disappointed by what he sees in Punjab now. And Gandhi dies in 1948, 15 years. And for 15 years, he's criticizing Gandhi. He is like in a very, very strong language, like he showed me his fangs and stuff like that. After Gandhi dies, Ambedkar dies in 1956. 8 years more, right? And what this Khalistanis are publishing, no. It was because Gandhi somehow stopped Ambedkar from becoming a Sikh. Not that, his own family saw and got disappointed in Punjab. And they published this. And now this Americans, they don't know. They say, Sikh Research Institute, they are a big board, they get more than $500,000, and they may be right. And these people are so perverted. This last example I'll tell you. On February 28, they are just like how they valorize mass murderers. So there was a guy who was one of the most dreaded terrorists, responsible for thousands of deaths. His name was Gurbachan Singh Manochar. And they said, this great religious warrior had died, and we would commemorate him. And I basically just took out, he died in 1983. I gave reportage. It's not opinion, it's reportage. So few months before he died, the India Today did a reportage, and it is sexual terrorism in Punjab. How these Khalistanis would basically abduct women, and they would abduct Sikh women and rape them. So how this Manochar, and they name him, this village, this person, they go there, and they barge into a Sikh family, and they abduct him. And so that is one. And I also showed footage when he died, his village, and that's 100% Sikh. They are celebrating as if it's Diwali. So this mass murderer, when he dies, his village is celebrated Diwali, and he would abduct and rape women. They are saying this is the Sikh Research Institute. They publish he's a great martyr, and based on that, they are changing. So I think I took too much time. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. That is a lot of work, a lot of history, a lot of information for us to absorb. Please do engage with Puneetji and support his work and share his work. I'm going to call Jay Kansaraji now to come to the mic, and introduce our congressman and give a.
Thank you, everyone. So today is actually a bit of a historic day on Capitol Hill. Perhaps many of you saw that the House resoundingly voted to ban or to require the divestment of the Chinese parent company from the social media app TikTok. It's over-resoundingly voted on, bipartisan, 352 to 65. And actually what many people in the United States don't know is that over 3 years ago, India led the charge on this by banning TikTok, because there was a pattern of anti-Hindu content being proliferated on the app that was meant to radicalize communities and pit and foment communal violence. And so India actually took a very bold stand against big tech, and decided that enough was enough. And actually America is following that cue now. So I think we should give a round of applause to the Republic of India for initiating a policy that we here in America can finally enjoy. And it was actually initiated by an Indian American, Hindu American member of Congress, Raja Krishnamurthy, who is the chairman of the subcommittee, or the special committee on the Chinese Communist Party. But we also have with us one of the members of Congress who actually voted on that bill today, Congressman Sri Thanedar of Metro Detroit, and he voted affirmatively for that bill for many of the reasons that we've discussed today, that social media is becoming or has already become a marketplace of hate and such ideas. And while we do respect the First Amendment, there should not be undue influence by foreign actors in the American public square. And Congressman Sri Thanedar is actually also a member of the Committee on Homeland Security, which is a very critical component to securing the American homeland, and also fighting against disinformation from all sides of the political spectrum, left and right. And he's also been a pioneer for the Hindu community by initiating the Dharma Caucus, the caucus on the Hindu, Sikh, Jain, and Buddhist communities, of which there is actually also resounding bipartisan support. 27 members joined in the inaugural year. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Congressman Sri Thanedar.
Good afternoon. How's everybody? Good afternoon. Good. Yes, sir. Myself. We had a session this morning. Today is the last day, so that's why many of the members of Congress have left town. But I delayed my flight so I can come and see you guys. I'm an immigrant. I was 24 years old when I came here on a F1 student visa to get a PhD in chemistry. And after my PhD, I'm a chemist by training, and I started a little small business, and that business grew. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. And when I realized I achieved my American dream, I wanted to help others to achieve theirs, and that's why I'm in politics. I ran for governor of Michigan as my first election. I got about 200,000 votes, but I didn't win that one. And then later I became a state rep in Michigan, and now here I'm in Congress. I'm the 5th Indian American congressperson, and first congressperson from Indian American congressperson from the state of Michigan. So there's a lot that I'm trying to do here. After my student visa was denied 4 times by the counselor in Mumbai, I finally got my visa, and I was able to come here. So I understand the struggles people have with our broken immigration system. So I'm doing a lot on fixing our immigration system, in making sure that the engineers and technologists are able to stay in this country and serve and help our businesses. So a lot of work is about making it easier for skilled workers available to American businesses, so American businesses can stay on top of innovation and ahead of the world. So that is something I'm doing on immigration, and my ultimate goal is to help reform this broken immigration system, eliminate the country quotas. The country quotas are very discriminatory, and make it easier and less stressful for people to be able to adjust their status and get their green cards and continue to contribute to American economy. But I'm really glad you're all here. I'm really glad that you are fighting. Hindus are often considered passive and not fighters, and they are very calm and quieter and live in their family and just focusing on their families, right? I grew up in India and learning about, that's a culture. Not an aggressive culture, not someone who attacks somebody else. They'll just be at home. And sometimes what happens is that when you're passive and you're not aggressive and you're not fighting, it's seen as a sign of weakness, unfortunately. And when weakness is seen like that, we get attacked. And that's why we get attacked. We see a lot of Hinduphobia. We see California SB 403, and that's just the beginning. The attacks on our temples and attacks on Hindus all over the world. And that is one of the reasons why I decided to form the Hindu caucus. For the first time in the United States Congress, we have a Hindu caucus. And currently I'm working on an India, so number of initiatives we are taking to ensure that people have religious freedom to practice their religion the way they want to, and not be, we need to fight this phobia, the bigotry, and the hatred, because there should be no place for hatred in America, no place for hatred against people's religious rights. And so that's what we are focusing in Congress. I'm also, through my small business committee, working on creating entrepreneurship opportunities for people who have been denied entrepreneurial opportunities, especially in black and brown communities. So I've done a lot in terms of raising the loan limits on small businesses so people can buy businesses, grow their businesses, create jobs. So there's a work I do on small business committee. I also serve on the Homeland Security and working on keeping our borders safe and making sure our visa systems work. So there's a lot that needs to be done, but I appreciate your support, I appreciate your involvement, I appreciate your activism in fighting for this. So thank you so much.
Before we move on, I did want to request Shri Tanadaji to present a couple of awards. We would like to recognize a few folks for their contributions in the field of journalism.
My friend Rohit Sharma. Rohit, you have done amazing work, and it is always a pleasure to see what you do in media, and always promoting strong India-US relationship. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much. I'll just take a moment to thank you, sir, for your service. And again, I think this is for all the media people we have. I don't think I can do it alone. Special thanks to Stay Home, Utsav, Poonam, I see Lalitji here, thank you. Mankuji, thank you so much for everything you guided me with and helped me with. Thank you so much.
And the next presentation is for Sehun Kim.
Sehun Kim.
Yes.
There he is. great work on behalf of Hindu Action. This is not, I've seen you many times here. I've seen your passion for religious freedom. I have seen your passion to fight Hindu phobia. And I have seen how well you have organized many religious communities to come together and fight hate in America. So thank you so much for all you do.
So thank you, HinduACtion and Congressman, for this award. Again, just a very quick word. As a member of the media, we pledge today here that we will do a better job in supporting this issue and also making known of the problem of the anti-Hindu sentiments that are being rampant in this country. So maybe next year we'll have a different conversation, and hopefully we will be in a better environment. So please pray for us, and thank you so much. Thank you.
I believe there may be a couple of questions, so we'll take a few of those before Congressman has.
Sure,
Is
I
that
can
okay?
read in about 5 minutes, but yeah,
Okay.
sure.
All right, so very short questions.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm glad that you have formed a Hindu caucus in US Congress. You know and you have heard all around that Hindus are being persecuted. And it's not because we are not, aggressive, but because somehow our passion doesn't go far enough. My question to you and request to you is, just like one congressman or congresswoman can introduce a bill on Islamophobia, how about you introducing a bill with your caucus about Hindu phobia and making sure that we are protected?
Yeah.
That, this will be great, and not only that, we are suffering. You see all the time Hindus being attacked and nothing gets done. Last month we have a Hindu man killed here in Washington DC, and the person is on TV. They have seen it. He is an ex-cop, and he had not yet been charged or even taken into custody. They have his picture. What else can we do? The only thing is, you are saying is that you have to take action. We can't take action. You, as our representative, have to take action with the support of others. Thank you.
No, I agree. I agree. And it is in the works. I am working on a resolution about Hindu phobia, and we'll introduce that soon in the United States Congress. Any other question before I go? No? All right. Thank you so much.
I'm going to try and pick up where we had to leave off on the video presentation by Sundar Iyer, who is an entrepreneur in California and was targeted by the California Civil Rights Department based on his Hindu heritage and background. So folks, those of you who are getting refreshments, as soon as you do, please do come back. And Utsav, we're ready to run that.
Dear members of Congress, my name is Sundar Iyer. I'm an Indian American tech entrepreneur and an American citizen. I was the CEO of my Cisco startup and the primary manager named in the Cisco caste discrimination case. I was sued by the California Civil Rights Department, the CRD. The CRD claimed my colleague and I discriminated and harassed their anonymous client, John Doe, because he was a Dalit, what the CRD defines as the lowest untouchable caste in Hinduism. Let me share with you what I have learned about the CRD over the past 5 sordid years. That it is okay for a government agency to commit over 100 fraudulent acts to target Hindu and Indian Americans. I only have time to name a few. The CRD sued me for Dalit caste discrimination despite me having given every top leadership position in my Cisco startup to a different senior Dalit candidate. The same lowest caste as John Doe. The CRD accused me of low pay despite their client making several $1 million more than me. For I took no equity as the CEO of my startup, giving it all to my employees, including John Doe. The CRD has different rules for Indian American managers. For the CRD frivolously accused my Indian American colleague of caste-based harassment by harassing John Doe. My colleague's most grievous crime, that he followed his white boss's orders to ask Doe for weekly status reports. The CRD can lie incessantly, backdate or make up dates, silence defendants, and make up baseless allegations in the last minute, suppress years of HR records, just in order to feign caste discrimination and to target Hindu and Indian Americans. The CRD can even suppress complaints from women engineers, suppress complaints from a white engineer, a Hispanic engineer. They can suppress complaints from an Asian engineer, complaints from junior engineers, senior engineers, and each and every supervisor of John Doe, including my own senior Dalit colleague, just in order to feign caste discrimination and target Hindu and Indian Americans as castes. I learned that the CRD can attack Hindus and Hinduism, even though I, the primary manager on whom all the allegations are based on, am irreligious. Let me double click on the CRD's logic. The primary manager is irreligious, so let's violate the First Amendment and force assign him the Hindu religion, just so that they can attack Hinduism. I learned that the CRD is about the Constitution of the United States. They made over 20 disparaging interpretations of Hinduism, compared Hinduism disfavorably to over at least 6 different religions, and submitted several book chapters and declarations that paint Hinduism in a bad light. These include defining caste as strictly Hindu, making references to Hindu Varna as rooted in violence, and even references to the complete destruction of Hinduism. I learned that the CRD can treat an entire ethnicity of Hindu and Indian Americans with utter disdain. They violated the due process and constitutional rights of almost 50 of my co-workers, assigning them all upper caste, accusing them of importing the caste system from India to America. And guess what? Without ever interviewing them. Let me remind you, my colleagues and I are California's primary example of Dalit caste discrimination for having offered every top leadership position in my group to a different senior Dalit colleague. There is no innocent explanation for the CRD's actions. I learned that the CRD can go to the press on the very same day of filing a lawsuit before a fair day in court and fuel a media and activist frenzy while hiding over 100 despicable actions from the judge, from activists, from state legislatures, from the California Attorney General, from the California Governor Newsom, from Dalit Americans, and you, respected members of Congress. I learned that the CRD is even above the Department of Justice, and they can violate their own DOJ-funded California versus Hate Charter. How? For I learned that the CRD can platform and work with an openly hateful activist group, Equality Labs, that has made several violent stereotypes of Brahmins, a caste which is a micro-minority in India. Equality Labs, the CRD's main collaborator, has openly said, Nazis are in fucking Germans in Europe. They're actually upper caste Indians. I learned that a civil rights agency can even have national origin bias and even express bigoted views against Hindu and Indian Americans. For the CRD extensively cites a survey by the activist group which prominently states that if Hindus migrate to other regions of Earth, then caste could become a world problem. I learned that a civil rights agency can racially profile and violently stereotype Hindu and Indian Americans. They accused us of assaulting, even raping, 26% of all Dalits in America. That would be, give or take, about 4 to maybe 40,000 physical assaults on Dalit Americans. All without a shred of evidence, without any corroboration in existing police records. I learned that the CRD can platform over 20 xenophobic remarks on Indian Americans. First, they casually otherized upper caste Indian Americans as boasting about their biological superiority. The CRD abused us, calling us privileged, dominant, inherently hostile, oppressive, and violent to Dalits. I even learned that the CRD has the right to fuel caste animus amongst Indian Americans with baseless claims. The CRD states that Dalit Indians in the United States, once their caste is revealed, have been raped, attacked, and spat upon simply because their caste was known to an upper caste Indian American. No evidence has been presented for this anecdotal claim. I learned that the CRD can racially target Indian managers and accuse them of being tribal. They accused us of de facto caste discrimination at work. They peddled conspiracy theories of us conniving across companies and sharing information about amongst the lower castes, refusing to see or regard anyone else as our peers, and that it's even okay for a civil rights agency to target an entire minority of Indian managers with comments such as, "Life is a living hell under Indian managers," with no supporting evidence whatsoever. I learned that a civil rights agency can make dual loyalty spears on us Indian Americans. The CRD alleged an increase in casteism in America due to the election of Indian Prime Minister Modi. I learned that the CRD considers anonymous, unsupported letters as pieces of evidence against Indian Americans. They platform claims by 30 self-identified Dalit women who anonymously accuse their Indian managers of unspecified casteism. The CRD couldn't name one specific incident, name the alleged casteist managers or their co-workers, give any specifics of these casteist comments, give any location, date, time, or any details as corroborating witnesses. I learned that the CRD does not even have to corroborate, let alone prove their accusations in court. For they state that more than 250 Dalits have reported discrimination, bullying, and sexual harassment based on their caste in the technology sector alone in the fall of 2020. But 4 years since that claim, there is not a single corresponding court complaint and not a single shred of evidence. But the CRD didn't stop at just targeting Indian Americans. I learned that the CRD is the first state agency which has a transnational charter. For they even dehumanize the upper caste Indians in India. The CRD accuses upper caste Indians in India as being violent and vengeful towards Dalits, and by repeatedly abusing the official Indian crime statistics. The CRD completely disregards decades of these disclaimers by the Ministry of Home Affairs in India that the Indian caste crime statistics are not necessarily based on caste considerations. They include mere allegations. They include crimes irrespective of their veracity or even severity. Many may not even have a caste motive, and worse, these crime statistics include crimes of the lowest caste amongst themselves. I learned that the CRD can sensationalize absolute numbers while purposely not taking into account per capita data. For example, they quote that there were 2 murders of Dalits every day in India in the year 2000. on average. While any murder is one too many, this translates to $0.45 murdered per 100,000. The Indian murder rate was 4.5 murders per 100,000. Let's not tell anyone that. The judge rejected this insane targeting of all Indians and Indian Americans. She also rejected each and every claim and self-acknowledged unscientific Equality Lab survey as anecdotal and not evidence. What did the CRD do when the judge ruled against them? They simply doubled down on their accusations in appeals court and pursued this narrative several times in multiple court forums. Finally, I learned that the CRD is not even answerable to America, for the CRD even ignores national security considerations. The CRD platformed an unscientific web survey claiming widespread caste discrimination in America, knowing fully well that there was no way to verify the American identity of the survey's respondents. They turned a blind eye when explicitly aware of the credible concerns of the survey being polluted by foreign data. They kept quiet when the survey's authors were caught red-handed when they solicited respondents outside the United States and asked them to use the Silicon Valley zip code to feign caste discrimination in America. They did not even speak up to the California legislature or the Cal State universities when caste activists influenced these caste policies in the United States using alleged caste crime statistics that they knew had no semblance in American records. I respectfully ask the members of Congress to allocate a budget within the Department of Justice to investigate the California Civil Rights Department and for the greater good of America. An agency that does not represent the truth harms all Americans. Several of my colleagues at Cisco and from many other companies across California would be willing to give testimony. They must not live their lives in fear, and their voices must not be suppressed. I thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So my apologies, since we are moving things around on our schedule just a little bit. At this point in time, I'd like to see if our student speaker, Ms. Jahnavi Ganesh, is ready? Okay, so Jahnavi is a student at Rutgers University and a member of Hindu Yuva. She will speak from her personal experience of anti-Hindu hate on campus.
Good evening and namaste. I'm Jahnavi Ganesh, a proud student of Rutgers University studying public health and the Northeast Regional Coordinator of Hindu Yuva, the largest student organization in the nation today, with chapters at over 75 universities. Today, I stand before you to address a growing concern that impacts our Hindu student youth community and the very fabric of inclusivity and diversity we cherish on our campuses. Hindu Yuva, which stands for Youth for Unity, Virtues, and Action, serves as a beacon for young Hindus across America, promoting our rich Hindu heritage and values and the enduring spirit of dharma. Yet, it's disheartening to see the rising tide of Hinduphobia, an issue that has become increasingly relevant due to narratives built against Hindus and Bharat at universities. Hinduphobia, or anti-Hindu hate, is a significant issue that goes often unaddressed in discussions about discrimination and prejudice. It encompasses a range of attitudes and actions from subtle biases and stereotypes to outright hostility and discrimination, targeting individuals who identify as Hindu or practice Hinduism. Growing up, like many in our community, I witnessed instances of Hinduphobia from misinformed stereotypes to outright discrimination. At Rutgers, we've seen how academic writings and misinformed opinions can influence perceptions, leading to a skewed understanding of who Hindus are. Professors and students influenced by these narratives have at times labeled our gods with derogatory names and branded Hindus who take pride in their dharma as fascists and nationalists. As a student at Rutgers and a proud Hindu, navigating these conflicting identities has been emotionally taxing. On one hand, I sought to excel academically and engage critically with diverse perspectives. Yet, on the other hand, I constantly grappled with the dissonance of being subjected to Hindu-phobic rhetoric within the very institution where I sought knowledge and growth. The derogatory remarks and unfair characterizations of Hinduism not only undermined my confidence, but also eroded my sense of belonging within the university community. The toll it took on my mental health cannot be overstated. Feeling misunderstood, marginalized, and vilified solely based on my religious identity led to feelings of isolation, anxiety, and microaggressions in academic settings took a significant toll on my well-being. It's disheartening to see how the pursuit of knowledge, which should be liberating and empowering, instead became a battleground for defending my very identity and existence as a Hindu. Our resolve is tested, not just at Rutgers, but across the nation. For instance, at Berkeley, a proud group of Hindu Yuva students faced backlash and threats from other student groups who opposed our events, challenging our right to exist as a registered organization. Similarly, at Northwestern, the mere act of a new chapter visiting a Hindu temple sparked unjust calls for our ban, propelled by a political group through campus newspapers. In these times, the courage of individuals like the Botswanian Hindu president of the Hindu Yuva chapter at Northwestern stands as a testament to our spirit. Through op-eds and public discourse, we call out the fake propaganda and educate our peers on the true values of Hinduism, embodying the mission of Hindu Yuva to practice, promote, protect, and preserve Hindu Dharma. This multifaceted approach is instrumental in deconstructing stereotypes and raising awareness about the rich cultural heritage and spiritual principles of Hinduism. These instances of Hinduphobia or anti-Hindu sentiment not only perpetuate harmful stereotypes, but also create an atmosphere of fear and exclusion for Hindu students on our campuses. When professors and peers dismiss our beliefs and traditions as backward or oppressive, it undermines our sense of belonging. It erodes the principles of academic freedom and intellectual diversity that universities should uphold. By perpetuating Hindu-phobic narratives, this not only harms Hindu students' well-being, but also perpetuates a culture of ignorance and prejudice that ultimately undermines the ideals of higher education. Educators, students, and leaders must challenge these stereotypes, promote an accurate understanding of Hinduism, and foster an environment where all students feel respected, valued, and included. The challenges faced by Hindu students extend beyond isolated incidents of discrimination and are often deeply rooted in systemic issues within academic institutions, creating a hostile environment for Hindu students to celebrate their culture freely. Despite these challenges, we stand proud and stronger than ever. We are committed to build a resilient and safe space for open conversations on Hindu topics on our campuses, fostering an environment where diversity of thought and belief is not just tolerated, but accepted and celebrated. No student should ever feel scared to practice and display their faith on campus. It is the paramount duty of university administrations to ensure a safe environment for all, devoid of discrimination and prejudice. Moving forward, we will engage with interfaith groups, draw wisdom from other communities facing similar challenges, and work diligently with administrators to get Hinduphobia recognized on campuses as a form of hate. Our journey is one of unity, resilience, and hope, inspired by the very essence of Hindu Dharma, which teaches us to see the world as one family. In closing, I urge policymakers, government officials, and community leaders to take concrete action to address the systemic issues of Hinduphobia within our academic institutions. It is imperative that we recognize harmful impact of biased curriculum and hostile classroom environments on Hindu students' well-being and academic success. Thank you for your attention and support. Together, we can make our American campuses a place of diversity, understanding, and respect for all faiths and cultures. Namaste.
Thank you, Janvi. You did a great job in sharing your experiences and giving words of encouragement to make a better environment for everybody on college campuses. Our next speaker is Ms. Suhag Shukla. Suhag ji is the Executive Director and founding member of Hindu American Foundation, one of the premier and pioneering organizations to advocate on behalf of the Hindu American community. Suhag ji will talk about targeted anti-Hindu hate and bias, the challenges and obstacles before us. Suhag ji.
Thank you. Thank you, HinduACTion, for hosting this very critically important and timely briefing. Thank you all for your kind attention to this very important issue. AGF advances the understanding of Hinduism to ensure and to secure the dignity of Hindu Americans now and for generations to come. So I want to talk about two things. And thank you for talking about what's happening on college campuses, because I would say that there's three major areas in which we're really facing rampant anti-Hindu bias and hate. That's college campuses, and also in our communities, and in both civic, corporate, and educational institutions at a legal level. So I'm going to focus my remarks on both hate crimes as well as institutionalized discrimination. We saw from Tejoben some of the graphic images of the types of attacks that have occurred against Hindu temples. I'm just going to name some dates, places, and the types of hate crimes that we've seen. In January 26, 2021 in Davis, California, a statue of Mahatma Gandhi, who's oftentimes seen as a symbol of Hindus, was toppled over. In spite of it being approved unanimously for the erection of that statue. And it was opposed by an organization that is run by pro-Khalistan activists. In February 2021, a community leader in Fremont, California was doxxed and attempts to intimidate him when individuals on social media goaded fellow activists, Khalistani activists, to go to his home and also to place false and negative reviews on his Google profile, so impacting him professionally or trying to. In August of 2022, the Sri Tulsi Mandir in Queens, New York was targeted for vandalism, and the statue of Mahatma Gandhi that they had was destroyed. August 2022, India Day Parade in Anaheim, protesters disrupted the event with posters targeting Hindu fascism in Anaheim. August 22, Taco Bell in Fremont, California. A Hindu American was verbally abused, harassed, slurs uttered towards him, as well as spat on, also by a Khalistani activist. In March 2023, the Indian consulate was vandalized. And again in July 2023, it was lit afire. In December of this last year, 2023, the SMVS Sri Swaminarayan Temple in Newark, California was targeted with vandalism, with graffiti that said F Modi and Khalistan Zindabad. In January of this year, the Sherawali Mandir was attacked. Maybe that was December. Vandalism, where it also said Modi is a terrorist, Khalistan Zindabad. In January of this year, there were numerous reports of about half dozen trucks circling residential parking lots, crowded shopping areas, as well as temples where there's significant presence of Hindu Americans, and strategically parking cars. These trucks also circled temples and busy freeways, stopping traffic. The trucks had lit displays which target the Hindu faith. Though there was an image of Prime Minister Modi, it said Hindu terrorists. For the average person who doesn't know who Narendra Modi is or what he might look like, that's a reflection on all Hindu Americans, because why on earth would these trucks be running back and forth across the San Francisco Bay Area if it wasn't for anything other than intimidating and harassing Hindu Americans? And then when there was a car rally during the inauguration of the Ram Mandir, Khalistani extremists blocked the way and drove into the white shoulder lane and tried to run over a community member who was recording the incident with their truck. When the individual tried to step aside to avoid being hit, they hit the individual with a stick. So this is just one of many examples just in the past 2 years where we've seen a spike in anti-Hindu incidents. So I want to talk a little about obstacles to justice. First, there's unfamiliarity amongst law enforcement. By the optics of it, they see kind of brown on brown, or desi on desi crimes or incidents that are occurring. So they might just think that it's personal or political. And the commonality between all of these, and I want to keep some of the burglaries aside because we don't know what's behind those. I mean, there might be the motivation of greed on one hand, but a motivation of hate on the other. The perpetrators that have been caught on video with all the temple attacks that I've mentioned, all of the street attacks that I've mentioned, the statements that are made during the commission of the attacks, the nature and content of the graffiti all point to the Khalistan movement. And as Punitji mentioned, the Khalistan movement is a violent separatist movement seeking an independent, theocratic Sikh state in India's state of Punjab. Now, he also told us some of the quotes of some of the leaders of this movement, that if my bus is not released by 5 p.m., I'd hack 5,000 Hindus to pieces. Another leader said, I give you my most solemn assurance that until we kill 50,000 Hindus, we will not rest. And a crowd of thousands of pro-Khalistan supporters then responded with chants, Hindu dogs, death to them. The reason I bring this up is that there's unfamiliarity with this movement amongst law enforcement and Americans at large that's rooted in sometimes the media not covering history properly or dismissing dismissing some of the concerns that are being raised by the Hindu American community. And you see that some of that hate, the anti-Hindu hate underlying this movement, you see it in some of the slurs that are uttered or some of the posters that some of these activists carry when they come to ordinary events that the Hindu American community is trying to host. So there's unfamiliarity. There's also just general complacency. Right now, law enforcement is understaffed. It's frustrated by a lot of the negative media attention that it receives. And there's also frustration that local DAs are not prosecuting crimes. So that might be part of it. One example is that when Khalistani separatists showed up at the SMVS Mandir a second time. They had already vandalized it, but they showed up a second time with one of these trucks and were menacingly circling the temple. The temple leaders called law enforcement. Law enforcement did not show up. And then when management called them again, they said, well, next time call 911. So there's complacency, there's unfamiliarity. There's also bias and unconscious bias. From our experience, there may be bias in federal agencies that should be treating all communities equally. Many of the federal agencies that we meet with regularly also meet with Khalistani leaders. So there's already standing relationships there. And so oftentimes when we raise concerns about hate crimes or bias incidents that are occurring, the conversation pivots to alleged transnational repression instead of acknowledging and addressing the attacks on Hindu American individuals and institutions. And oftentimes we see that these incidents are not taken seriously by law enforcement because of media bias that I mentioned earlier, of issues just not even being covered, such as the Air India bombing. or that threats from groups like Sikhs for Justice are downplayed. Out of all of those crimes that I mentioned, only 3 have been investigated as hate motivated. Now, just generally speaking, hate crimes, to get law enforcement to see something as a hate crime is a challenge for all communities. There needs to be more education of law enforcement for them to be able to recognize what a hate crime is. Oftentimes, there are these kind of intra-community subtleties that they miss. One thing I want to point out is not all things at Rutgers should be traced back to Audrey Trushke. There's actually some wonderful things happening at Rutgers University, including the research that's coming out of the Network Contagion Research Institute. They have found that there's been a rise of anti-Hindu rhetoric on social media coming from Khalistan supporters. And when there's spikes in that sort of social media rhetoric, it is oftentimes followed by physical attacks. They found the same thing about anti-Semitic social media and that causal link. So that's something that I encourage local leaders, if you run a temple or you're active in your community, to look into those things. And we know also that in Canada, Hindu temple leaders have had extremists firing guns into their homes. When there's people from within the Sikh community who are speaking out against this movement, they've been physically attacked. And of course, we know about the Air India bombing. So a lot of these things, if and when they happen at the local temple or at the local community level, it's really important that we report these crimes. So many of these things that I listed off, people had not reported them, and we're trying to encourage them to report. Even if nothing happens, if we don't have that data, if law enforcement doesn't have that data, then we as an organization that's engaged in educating law enforcement are not able to make them aware or take these issues seriously. The second thing I want to talk about is institutionalized discrimination. I think a couple people have mentioned SB 403, but we've seen the institutionalizing of caste from college campuses to corporations and even at the county and state level. 19 institutions of higher education have passed caste policies where they've added caste to their non-discrimination statutes or policies. That actually accounts for 41 campuses, because of the 19, one is the Cal State University system, which has 23 campuses. 4 Fortune 500s have added caste to their non-discrimination policies. 4 unions, 3 cities or counties, of which 2 passed and 1 failed, and 2 at the state level, both of which luckily have failed. It's the first protected class category under non-discrimination policies that singularly target a class of on their membership in a particular national origin or religion, namely Indians and Hindus. This, by definition, is discrimination. Now, 3 or 5 years out from these caste policies having been instituted, there's only been 1 case. And that case predates any of the policies. And we heard from Sundar just earlier about it. So what's really pushing these the addition of a racially loaded term like caste into non-discrimination policy that targets a community that's less than 1.5% of the American population? It's certainly not a loophole in the law, because whether it was the Civil Rights Department that targeted Sundar and Ramana, whether it's the many college or corporate administrators trying to justify why they've added caste, or whether it's the author of the now vetoed SB 403, all of them said that caste discrimination is already banned under existing law. So then why are we even having this conversation? It's definitely not based on evidence or verifiable data. The only scientific survey that's been done on Indian American attitudes is by the Carnegie Endowment, and they found that caste discrimination is virtually non-existent. The fact that there are policies and laws in place and not more than even the one single case that predates it kind of validates that finding. And it's not a sudden spike in reported incidents alleging caste discrimination. What's behind it is Hindu hate cloaked in the language of social justice. Equality Labs, which Sundar also mentioned, is an organization that presents itself as a charity and civil rights organization, but is in fact a for-profit organization that sells caste competency trainings, amongst other things. And in these trainings, they vilify Hindus and the Hindu faith. They have called Hinduism the spiritual foundation of slavery. Its founding director has stated publicly that the real Nazis aren't in Germany, they're effing upper caste Indians. Both demonizing Indians, ironically, on the basis of caste, and simultaneously downplaying the atrocities committed by the Nazis. The supporters of the caste policies, what they've been able to do is they've partnered with radical scholar activists and benefited from the institutional rot that we witnessed right here on Capitol Hill during the hearings on college campuses, where we heard from presidents from Yale, Harvard, and Penn, where administrators have become more beholden to an ideology rather than ideals of freedom, equality, and human flourishing, and where proponents of this ideology see Hindu students, similar to Jewish students, as lower on the scale of oppression, and in fact, oppressors. The coalitions that are supporting caste policies also are made up of other South Asians, many who support the Khalistan movement, many who have strong anti-Hindu elements amongst them, as well as Islamist organizations. But again, this brown-on-brown optic can sometimes dissuade what are otherwise our normal allies to come in defense of us. Now, not all things are bleak. We do have court challenges pending on these caste policies, but there are some challenges within those legal challenges. One is that it's a novel area of the law. Other challenges are that this prevailing stereotype of the caste system as a inhumane hierarchy in which all relations between Hindus are governed in the ways that we treat or mistreat one another is really set in from 6th grade in the minds of all Americans. The second thing is that instinctively, this feels like it's the right thing. Well, we're helping people who are saying they're being discriminated against. But how can discrimination ever be a solution to discrimination? Why not turn to our laws that all
in Myanmar and surrounding areas. She will be talking about the targeting of the Métis Hindus in America. Please welcome Dr. Billy Guarino.
I have a slide, yes. I can start speaking with Kurumjiri. Good evening, everyone, distinguished members of Congress and esteemed guests. I want to thank the organizers for giving me a platform today where people from different faiths, Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, and even atheist community can come together, synergize, and raise a unified voice against hate. Today, I speak on behalf of the underrepresented Métis Hindu community who have become a quote-unquote micro-minority in the land of our own birth, which is Manipur. We have been demonized, we have been subjected to unimaginable hate over the past few months. As we address the rise of Hindu hate, we cannot ignore the tragedy unfolding in Manipur in northeastern India, especially the plight of the Métis community. The slow genocide of the Métis is a stark reminder of the pervasive nature of discrimination, disinformation campaigns, and subjugation. In the 2001 census, Métis Hindus comprised 62% of the population of Manipur. In 10 years, in 2011, the number plummeted to 41.39%, and for a relative comparison, Christians constitute about 41.29%, but in the media, there will always be this minority-majority discourse that one would see. And today, in 2024, if we go by the trend and extrapolate, the Meitei Hindu population could have reduced to another 20% in the last 10 years. The 2021 census has been delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So over an extended duration, the Meitei populace has endured systemic marginalization, targeted acts of aggression, and deliberate efforts aimed at erasing our cultural identity. We have been pushed to the periphery of societal discourse, our voices silenced, and identities vilified. The territorial boundaries of Manipur has been encroached upon, our cultural legacy undermined, and our very existence jeopardized. The transgressions committed against the Meiteis cannot be dismissed as isolated occurrences. Rather, they epitomize a broader continuum of discrimination and subjugation entrenched within a societal framework and the overall rise of Hindu hate all over the world. The vilification of the Meitei populace represents a blatant infringement upon our fundamental human rights, casting a pall over our collective moral conscience. And I have an example here of 393 temples, including a 200-year-old Shiv Mandir, which has been destroyed. The destruction of Hindu temples represent a profound violation of religious freedom, which Diya also talked about, cultural heritage and human dignity. Throughout history, Hindu temples have served as sacred spaces for worship, community gatherings, and cultural celebrations. They stand as tangible symbols of spiritual devotion, architectural prowess, and historical continuity. Move to the next slide. So, if you see here, this was the temple, the Shiv temple that was vandalized. I wouldn't even call it vandalized. The whole thing was flattened, and you can see a symbolic beheading of Lord Shiv here. The Shiva Lingam was completely destroyed, and this is what is happening in Manipur right now. The desecration of these sacred sites have erased centuries of cultural and religious heritage. It undermines the principles of tolerance, pluralism, and mutual respect that are the bedrock of a democratic society. Some cases, apart from this, are the desecration of indigenous sacred sites in Manipur. So this is a Nag Mandir that has been destroyed. Indigenous sites at Mount Kaubru and Tangjung Hills. These are religious sites that could be comparable to, say, like Mount Kailash, where people, have pilgrimages every year. Also in Meitei culture, it is customary, as Tejalji has also pointed out, that where every household maintains a mandir, or a designated space of worship within its premises. And tragically, numerous Meitei houses have been burned and flattened. Like when I say flattened, the houses have been completely destroyed with JCBs, and there's nothing left of those houses. It's just rubble left now. Not only dwelling, but also sacred places of reverence. So I do have like 393 temples that were destroyed, but with the 2,500 plus houses that were destroyed, all mandirs within the household and outside the household have also been destroyed. Today, we must unequivocally condemn the wanton destruction of sacred sites and places of worship and hold accountable those responsible for such egregious acts. We must stand in solidarity with the Hindu community, affirming their right, or our right, to worship freely and safeguarding our sacred spaces from harm. The gradual marginalization of the Meitei Hindus serve as a poignant reminder of the crucial need to confront hatred and intolerance in all their manifestations. And today, I appeal to everyone to stand in unwavering solidarity with the Meitei community. Help us amplify our voice and champion our cause for justice. Together, let us denounce the act of violence and discrimination and root out the vicious cycle of hate. We cannot lay claim to the ideals of justice and equity while overtly disregarding the plight of a marginalized Meitei Hindu community. Let us pledge to support the Meitei community, reaffirming our steadfast commitment to the cause of justice, principles of tolerance, diversity, and mutual respect. And through collective endeavor, we can forge a future wherein every individual is accorded due reverence, irrespective of their ethnic lineage, religious affiliations, or socioeconomic standing. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Geeta Desikanji. She is a professional in the medical and healthcare industry, a writer, an activist for the Hindu American community, and also an executive member of A4H, Americans for Hindus. Meetaji.
Namaste, everyone. My task today is to share with you my experiences and the experiences of others in our Hindu American community on the challenges in media representation. With a show of hands, how many of you have tried to reach out to the media, submit a rebuttal, or submit an op-ed piece? Okay. So next time we do this, I want to see every hand go up. Okay, thank you to all who've done it already. Okay, so moving forward. Okay, so like I said, we're talking about the challenges in media representation. And so how many of us know already that Hinduphobia is real and rampant, and yet the media is distinctly averse to listening to us? We have been silenced. Hindu voices have been silenced. We've tried, but when it comes to airing our own Hinduphobia concerns, we're not getting any success. When we criticize because it's an anti-Hindu hate article, we still don't get any hospitality from the media. So what we're noticing is our topics of discussion today. How does the media perpetuate Hinduphobia? And who are the perpetrators? And then I'm going to share my own personal story with the LA Times and the New York Times and Washington Post. So the first goal today is, how does the media perpetuate Hinduphobia? So for that, I'm going to show you right here. This is an article from the Los Angeles Times. It was published on the 2nd of February. And it had two Hinduphobic disinformation items that I wanted to point out to the newspaper outlet. So you can see how I read my articles. See all those red ink there? I really analyze it. Okay, so this was a rebuttal I submitted to them, and I don't expect us to read the rebuttal, but I'll share with you the highlights that I pointed out. The first one was that in this article, where they claim that Modi is not running a democracy but a theocracy, or he's a fascist, all this anti-Hindu hate narratives, I looked at that and I said, what's missing here? What's missing is the Pew study. How many of you have heard of the Pew study that showed that all minorities in India feel free to practice their religion? Have you ever read about that in the mainstream media? Not once. The evidence has been subverted. And instead, as you can see in this slide, they're stating the Prime Minister's militant Hindu supremacy has replaced political pluralism as India's dominant. Oh, it's not moving forward. Except, can you give me a hand here? Yeah, so now you can read all of this, right? The Prime Minister's militant Hindu supremacy has replaced political pluralism as India's dominant ideology. So this is what they're writing, a false Hindu hate narrative. Now let's go to the next slide. They also subverted the findings from the 2022 study from the University of Sydney, Australia. It was called The Status of India's Democracy. How many of you have heard of this study? Okay, a couple of people. So what did Professor Salvatore Babones conclude from this study? He said, India is not a fascist country. It is being wrongly portrayed as a fascist state by the global media. And he acknowledged very nicely, he said activists, journalists, and intellectuals absolutely have a role to call out problems, and India has problems, like all countries have problems. But the problem is they allow intentionally to color the overall evaluation of the system. So when they said the democracy rankings have slid down, they did that by the numbers and not as a percentage. So India's population is so much. So naturally the numbers will be higher than other countries. But when you look at it from percentage, it's very low. And those are the things he pointed out. So his paper is called Indian Democracy at 75, Who Are the Barbarians at the Gate? And that's the media that he's talking about, that they have colored it. So he said, this is a very interesting statement from Professor Baboons. He said, anti-Hindu Western intellectuals do not fear the rise of India, they resent it. And he also pointed out that just as the Western anti-Semites are offended by the success of Israel, Western anti-Hinduists are offended by the success of India. LA Times subverted some key facts about the Ram Mandir, which, as we know, many of the media outlets did. And what did they subvert? They subverted that it's a large Hindu temple of Ram stood there for 1500 years prior. They just said it was, you know, a mosque and it was destroyed and on, right? So they hid a lot of truth. So when you look at the next slide, this is just for your reference, because I'm sure you'll all get a copy of the slides. It just shows what the true facts are. And I want to especially shout out to Suhag Shitla and the Hindu American Foundation for sending this information to all the media outlets, mainstream media outlets, but not one of them bothered to cite this information. So who are the perpetrators of Hindu phobia in the media? This is my article in which I addressed it. I'll share the references with you at the end, but for now, I just want to share with you all the perpetrators. So let's take a look at them. Bloomberg News, LA Times, New York Times, Washington Post, the Time Magazine, the US News and World Report, NBC, NPR, CNN, Wall Street Journal, and this is to name a few, yeah? Okay, now let's look at, so here's New York Times, same story, the anti-Hindu information about the mandir. And here is from the Wall Street Journal. So this is not necessarily one or two media outlets, but many. Here's a rebuttal I wrote to Washington Post, as you can see. And this is from last year. This is not for the Ram Mandir. This is because they, again, condemned India as a democracy in its standing. And I wrote to them and I said, where is your data on the new Pew Research Center? So you can see they've subverted the data. In spite of bringing it to their attention, they just won't cite it because it serves us, but it doesn't serve their false anti-Hindu hate narrative, right? And here's another one, and this goes back to 2022. So this has been going on for some time now. It's not just with the Ram Mandir, it's been going on. And here's one I sent to the New York Times article, and again pointing out the Pew Center study. And we all know Pew Center is the most respected organization for research, and they're subverting that data. And as you can see here, there was another, as Suhag also pointed out, the anti-Hindu disinformation, a case study of Hindu phobia on social media, and that's from Rutgers. So now we get to the third, my own personal story over 4 years with LA Times, because I live in LA, I live in Irvine, California, so I follow that paper every day. And a lot of people tell me, why do you subscribe to it? It's such a anti-Hindu hate paper. Why do you? I said, I want to, bring them around. I want to keep working on them until they come around. So I still follow them. Okay, so again, all this information I'm giving you are all published in the Voice of Hindus, which is a blog. So you have the references right here on these slides. So here's my story. Over the last 4 years, from May 2019 to February 2024, I submitted 35 rebuttals or rejoinders to 33 Hinduphobia articles in the LA. Now let's look at what kind of rebuttals did I have to submit to them. Well, if you look at this column here on the third column, refuted anti-Hindu hate caste disinformation propaganda to promote SB 403. I had to refute that every time they wrote something. So you can see here that, as Suhag mentioned, SB 403 was that caste, the bigoted caste bill as we call it. Well, you can see in 2023 is when they wrote the most number of articles on that I had to refute. And again, the fourth column shows you that what did they do as far as malicious subversion of relevant scientific data. Well, they subverted the data from Pew, as we talked about, from Carnegie, that Suhag also mentioned, from Rutgers, from University of Sydney, Professor Baboon's study. So you see how they are not bringing out the scientific studies. They're just harping on these anti-Hindu hate narratives. And in the last column, you can see that I had to refute Hindu false narratives consistently for the last 4 years. You can see how well spread out that distribution is, although it keeps getting worse. I had to refute these where they kept saying India is a fascist state led by a fascist Hindu PM. Now, you all heard Sundar Iyer speak, right? Well, guess what? When I was dealing with the LA Times, I requested them to interview Sundar because they should bring the truth out. I looped in Sundar in my emails and he offered, and I want to share his emails with you all. On September 26th, this is when we were in the throes of SB 403. We were all carrying 100 pounds on our shoulders trying to fight it. That's the time Sundar wrote to Jong Park, who is a columnist for LA Times. He said, "Dear Jong, who will tell Governor the truth? I am available at," he gave his phone number. "Let me know if that works for you." And I was copied on this email. He said, "I will give you first-hand proof of that CRD truth." They did not interview him. Can you believe that? They were just rejecting the truth. Then, on October 7, as you all know, he vetoed it. But prior to that, and I'll come back to this in a second, on September 7th, we all were standing in Sacramento in a peace rally we were asking the governor to please veto. And that's what we were saying. And we all had our fingers on our lips in another photograph saying that we have been silenced. Our Hindu voices have been silenced. So now if you see, October 7th, the SB 403 was vetoed. And on December 29th, again Sundar reached out to LA Times. I was copied on the email. He said, "Dear John, I hope you're well. I did not receive a response from you. Will you stand up for the truth with me? I seek your help and cooperation." Again, nothing from LA Times. So in summary, anti-Hindu hate by the US media is real and happening in front of our eyes with a deafening silence by the media. Ironically, nothing in the Western media about Hindus is ever written by authentic Hindu scholars themselves. This is called journalistic malpractice. You know, for medical professionals, we say medical malpractice. This is journalistic malpractice. And this must stop. The real threat to Hindus is right here, right now, most especially to our future generations. So I'm telling the media this. So do something imperfect, frustrating, depressing, and slippery as it may be. This discourse is all we have. So going forward, and I just published this yesterday in the Voice of Hindus, the tips, I'm Professor Geeta as they call me, to stop propagating Hinduphobia. We said media must begin a meaningful dialogue with Hindus. Media must stop demonizing and shaming Hindutva. Hindutva means the essence of Hinduism, and not some nasty, hostile, aggressive people, right? Okay, they're just shaming us by saying that. Stop publishing articles written with intentional deceit. We know now that it's intentional deceit. Stop the bigoted caste legislation hoax. And stop the brutal attacks on Hindu temples. So the media really needs to do its job. It's not doing its job. Stop the vile and hateful tropes that demean Hindus on the basis of our identity, our deities, and our religion. I took that off, but if there was a comic published in the LA Times of a Hindu goddess, I don't know if you all saw it, and they're showing her sitting in an airplane next to this man, and this man, he is texting his wife. There's a Hindu goddess sitting, and she's hogged up all the space in the airplane. That's how bad it is right now for Hindus. And the last one I recommended was to use authentic Hindu scholars to write about Hindu issues. And again, the references are there. So 2 takeaways. The fake human rights activists and the academics have been shouting, dismantle global Hindutva. The politicians and the lawyers are making malicious announcements. To erase Hindutva, which means essence of Hinduism. And the media have been writing reams of anti-Hindutva hate disinformation. The only voice that has been denied a platform, a group which has not been consulted, are we Hindu Americans, a microcosmic, law-abiding, model minority that continues to be targeted by the anti-Hindu hate groups and the media. So here we go. I have 19 reference links for you all in the back. Just go to any of those. The first 4 are my own publications from the Voice of Hindus, and everything I talked about is all in there, including the 35 rebuttals. They're actually published, 1 through 35, in one of these references. And so with that, thank you for being here, and if you have any questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
Unfortunately, our younger generation, they read about this or they hear about this in media, and they believe them more than they believe us. So I feel that there has to be some comprehensive knowledge-based data that we can show to our kids, because they feel like, no, but this reporter says that, or BBC is saying that. And so no matter what we say, the younger generation is not ready to hear.
That's a fabulous question and a comment, and I'm totally on your page. We really need to have that. And so when I heard Congressman Sri Thanidaji say he wants to introduce a resolution on Hinduphobia, I was like, wow, we need that. But we need much more now. We can't wait for the resolution. We need something to happen now, right? So let's all put our heads together and think how we could do this, because not only your kids or my kids, but all kids, Indian kids, are totally, we've lost them to all of this. So it's a real tragedy for us, and we need to do something about it. I agree.
So thank you, Geeta ji, for rounding up our sessions. I do want to make sure that the few of us that have stayed the whole time and listened to all the presenters to join us in front in a little bit. We do have a joint declaration that we want to get out in front of the larger society on what this informational discussion session was about, and what we hope for our lawmakers and city officials and local officials to help us with. So everybody, if you can come to the front and a couple of you hold up these joint declarations, we will read them out.
Suhag.